Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
8:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman on the line. ABC News White House correspondent Jake Tapper. Gee, what can we talk to Jake about? I don't know. Yeah, I guess there was a little thing going on yesterday. Of course, the Supreme Court ruled that Obamacare is constitutional. Jake, you were at the White House when all this was going down, weren't you?
I was, yeah.
So how was it? What was the scene there?
Well, behind the scenes, President Obama was outside the Oval Office in an area called the Outer Oval, walking by, and there was a flat-screen TV by the desk of one of his assistants, and it has split screen, and has four cable channels were on. And he sees two of those four erroneously reporting that the Supreme Court struck down his signature legislation, and the president was kind of just standing there, from how aides describe it, looking. The sound was not on, so he's just reading the graphics, reading the chyrons, and then his White House counsel, Kathy Rumler, comes in and stands at the doorway, gives him two thumbs up. Tells him, because she has gotten information from one of the White House lawyers at the Supreme Court, and also reading SCOTUS blog, gotten the correct information that the law was upheld, and the president gave her a hug, and then they moved on. But it was kind of a weird moment described to me as a cognitive dissonance in the media reporting the wrong information while his lawyer gives him the right information.
All right, so then the president decides he's going to make a statement, and we all expected that would be the case. I know this is a minor point, but was it unusual for something of that magnitude to be done in what they call a tight pool situation, where not many reporters were allowed to be in the presence of the president when he made this statement?
Well, I mean, there are presidential historians that could better judge that. Sometimes they make it a tight pool situation. Other times they don't. It really, I think their goal, and obviously I want as much, as a reporter, I want as much access and as many opportunities to ask the president questions as I can possibly get. So I'm a flawed and a non-objective arbiter of this. I think that every single time he comes out, he should take questions. Mm-hmm. But that's not what they wanted. So they wanted him to give his message and have it be clean. In fact, we were briefed yesterday by some senior administration officials about the ruling and the reaction, and they wouldn't. We couldn't even quote them, because the goal of the White House that day was to have President Obama be the only one quoted.
All right. So it was declared a tax by the Supreme Court, John Roberts, to say this is a tax and that's how it can stand.
The fine for those who can afford health insurance but do not purchase health insurance by 2014, which President Obama adamantly denied in an interview with George Stephanopoulos in 2009 that it was a tax. It was declared a tax, and that's how John Roberts found a way to keep the bill alive.
So is the president happy to call it a tax today? Do we know?
I don't know. We'll find out. He's probably never been happier to be wrong about not just whether or not it's a tax, but his vote against confirming John Roberts in 2005.
Right.
But I don't know. We haven't gotten an opportunity to debate that yet. I mean, it was part of the Solicitor General, the lawyer for the government, when he was making his argument to the court. He was making this argument. It's you could also include this as a tax if you don't buy the Commerce Clause argument, the idea that the government has the right under the Commerce Clause not only to regulate health insurance but to require everybody to have health insurance. If you don't buy that, you can at least support the notion that the government has the right to tax people as enumerated in the Constitution, and we can tax those who do not buy health insurance. So
that language
was an argument by the administration.
That language was not in the bill, and it
certainly was not in the rhetoric when you sell the bill either. No, not at all.
All right, so Republicans.
We should point out also, by the way, that the same fine, the same tax exists in Massachusetts. I mean, it was part of Romney's bill.
But Republicans are saying now, well, if you declare it a tax, that's going to make it a little bit easier for us to repeal. Are you hearing the same thing that they can, you only need 51 votes in order to do it now, we can do it through reconciliation?
That's the first I've heard that argument. I think that Republicans are trying to find ways that this is good news for them, and one of them is the idea that they now have this Supreme Court affirmed tax, and there are all sorts of other ways, and certainly it's a motivating factor for the base. I think it's complicated because Mitt Romney supported the exact same thing in Massachusetts, and that's why when Romney spoke yesterday, talked about repealing Obamacare on his first day in office. You didn't really hear much detail beyond that because it's a complicated issue for him.
All right, so take off for a moment your White House reporter hat and put on your hat as political analyst in the presidential race. Mm-hmm. How does this play out, and who benefits most from this Supreme Court ruling? Well,
it's tough to say right now. Obviously, the health care bill is unpopular. A majority of the American people do not approve of it, do not like it. That said, individual portions of it are popular. You do hear President Obama talk about those individual portions on the road. I think ultimately the legislation is more liability than benefit to the president. I don't think that can be questioned. I think that Mitt Romney is a flawed messenger, a flawed soldier in the anti-Obamacare army. I just think that's a fact. It's something that was pointed out time and time again during the Republican primaries. And so what the Obama team is going to do, or going to try to do, whether or not you buy this is another question, mm-hmm. but they are going to try to cast this in terms of President Obama doing what he knows to be right. Even if you disagree with him, you know where he stands, and you know he will do what he thinks is right. That's not really all that different from the 2004 George W. Bush pitch if you substitute the health care bill with the Iraq War. You might disagree with it, but you know where this guy stands, and you know that he stands for something, and that is how one of the ways they're going to try to use this against Mitt Romney, much in the same way that the Bush people went after John Kerry as a wishy-washy politician with no core convictions.
We just have a moment or two left, and I just want to ask you, on a personal level, Jake, I mean, as somebody who watches how the Washington works, I got to say, on my level, I was sort of surprised at the outcome.
Yeah, no,
were you stunned?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I knew people that thought that it was going to be upheld and thought it was going to be upheld with John Roberts in the majority, but I didn't know anyone who thought it was going to be Kennedy on the other side and Roberts just joining with the liberals. I did not know anybody. And yeah, I mean, I think the conventional wisdom, which I totally bought into, was that it was going to be overturned 5-4. Can I just mention quickly? On Sunday, George Stephanopoulos will have Vicki Kennedy, Ted Kennedy's widow, as his guest on This Week. Mm-hmm. After which he'll talk with the White House Chief of Staff Jack Lew and Congressman Paul Ryan, Republican from Wisconsin, about this. And on the round table, you'll have George Will and Keith Olbermann debating the health care law.
Lord have mercy.
On Sunday.
That'll be fun. All right, Jake, good to have you on as always. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Jake Tapper, Senior White House Correspondent for ABC News. We'll get your reaction to this as well. We got Brett Baer coming up at 8:36. I want to respond to something that Jake said.